Our next session, Coffee as a Force for Good, Lessons from Supply Chain Initiatives for Carbon and Biodiversity.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to a coffee farm. That is what your coffee sounds like when it is under agroforestry initiatives, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk today about three topics that I'm sure you heard a lot of this week, and you will hear a lot more about this week, but with real and tangible results. We're going to talk about supply chain linked interventions, we're going to talk about biodiversity, and we're going to talk about artificial intelligence, and we're going to talk about how three different organizations can work together to bring the reality of those three concepts into a material and impactful force. My name is Andrew Nobrega. I'm the Chief Product and Development Officer at PUR. We are a project developer working with corporates to develop nature-based solutions that occur in their supply chain communities in 20 different countries. We develop these projects for ecosystem services including carbon, including biodiversity, to promote local livelihoods and to support the resilience of the supply chains of the organizations that we work with. I'm joined here today by Julie Renaud, who is the head of coffee sustainability at Nespresso, I think a brand many of you or all of you will know very well. Julie particularly has been in charge of the development of one of the largest supply chain linked insetting projects globally that has been developed for 12 years and has included regenerative agriculture and agroforestry across Nespresso's portfolio of coffee sourcing regions. We also have Viviana Ruiz Gutierrez, my apologies, who is the Director of Conservation Studies at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and in particular has been innovating with her multidisciplinary team on the development and consolidation of one of the largest data sets of citizen science for bird species globally. And I am very looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have today. We're going to focus on how the three of our organizations have worked together over the last couple of years to develop real impacts in the field that are measured with new science and innovation. Help me welcome the team here. So just a first question. You know, when we're thinking from an Nespresso perspective, you've done something quite innovative over the last 12, 14 years with this program. Could you discuss with us a little bit of where did this concept come from? How has it grown? You know, what does this program mean to you?
So first of all, good morning, everyone, and hope you will enjoy the session. So actually, when we started this agroforestry program with PUR Projet, we built it on a very strong foundation, which is our sourcing program that started actually 20 years ago. So this program is a farmer relationship management program. It means that we have a high connection with the farmers and we track the coffee to our factories from the source of it. So we know exactly where the coffee comes from. And to start with the first decade of work before we started agroforestry, we really focused on implementing at farmer level the socio-environmental practices that were minimizing the negative effect. And as we entered the new generation of our strategy, we were looking really for a game changer to maximize the positive effect we could have. And it's true that being a coffee brand and relying on agriculture, we have on both sides challenges and opportunities. Challenges because the farmers are very much impacted by climate change with extreme weather patterns. But at the same time, agriculture offers an incredible source of solutions because we can really sequester carbon, and that's how the whole agroforestry program started. We really wanted to maximize the carbon sequestration, leveraging the farm who were supplying coffee to us. So that's how it all started.
Fantastic. So to date, my understanding is that we've planted roughly 3.3 million trees in the agroforestry ecosystem across 6 different countries with about 30,000 farmers. Today we're going to focus on Colombia as a focal point for the evaluation of biodiversity impacts. What does Colombia mean specifically to Nespresso, and why was it selected as part of this program?
So Colombia is one of our main sourcing countries. We count around 30,000 farmers are part of this program I did mention just before. They are located in different regions. Today we will be talking particularly about the Cauca region, which is south of Bogota. Coffee, for people who don't know coffee farm, even though you just saw a video, it's Arabica coffee grows at an altitude around 1,500 meters to 2,000 meters high in altitude, so on very, very steep slopes. And when we first looked at integrating agroforestry in the design of farming, let's say, we first also looked at how we could address soil erosion because of the slope. It was really, let's say, the first entry point beyond carbon on how these trees could deliver certain services beyond carbon. And that's how it all started back in 2013, planting very, like a few, or not even 100,000 trees, while now we are at 3 million in this region.
Fantastic, fantastic. So when we talk about, just make sure this is working. There you go.
Yes.
When we talk about coffee agroforestry systems, fundamentally what we're seeking to do with Nespresso and globally is to develop programs that bring what is full sun coffee into a shaded system. That shaded system provides and brings back natural ecosystem services that can have been lost through the non-shade coffee systems. So we're talking about bringing back soil health. We're talking about enhancing watershed health in the hydrological cycle. We're talking about also opportunities for income diversification for the local communities, and obviously and particularly looking at how do we sequester carbon on farm that can be valued for Scope 3 emission targets, et cetera, with Nespresso. So we've been doing this for about 8 to 12 years now, depending on the country, with Nespresso. And the scale of the operations has become quite significant. It's one of the largest scale insetting projects that you're going to find. And as a result of the length of time that this program has been operating, it also affords the opportunity to measure real impacts. And that is a challenge that we see in the industry. Regenerative agriculture, supply chain linked interventions, many of them have been starting in the last 5 years at the scale that we need to see for the momentum we need to see grow. But considering that the growth pattern of trees, regenerative agriculture practices to enhance soil, they take 3 to 5 years to start to produce results. The projects in Colombia and the projects in the rest of the portfolio of Nespresso provide a unique opportunity to have real and material results from those programs that we're happy to demonstrate today. And so that's where we link with Cornell to hear a little bit more about the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and the work that you've been doing.
Thank you. So at the Cornell Lab, we developed, we have the largest biodiversity database in the world, and we have developed a very unique biodiversity index called the Biodiversity Progress Index. And this index really leverages advances in AI called deep learning models with about 1.8 billion observations worldwide that we have in eBird to generate a really robust metric that can measure the state of nature at really high spatial and temporal resolutions. And we do this really using 2 simple metrics as part of the Biodiversity Progress Index. So one is called completeness, and this really looks at the proportion of species, for example, that are in a coffee farm relative to how many should be in a coffee farm. And so that really helps you benchmark and also track progress of nature across time. But we also look at performance, which is landscape-based. So we don't just have information on farms. We also can look at the rest of the landscape, which is really unique. And so we're able to look at the contribution of actions such as agroforestry to the landscape itself. And so we look at the proportion of species that are in a coffee farm relative to the available species in the surrounding landscape. So in combination, using completeness and performance, we can really track and benchmark nature, but also see the progress and impact of actions across time.
And I am going to promote a little bit, Cornell. This is something that we have not seen in the industry. PUR has been working for quite some time in this space. I'm personally a zoologist first, and so love working on any zoology topics. And this is really groundbreaking. When we first saw the work that Nespresso and Cornell were doing together initially, and they've been doing it for the last 5 years, I was blown away personally, and as an organization, we were blown away. So we jumped at the chance to be able to further evaluate the work we're doing with the data sets that we were able to bring from the project to that analysis with Cornell. Speaking of that, could you speak a little bit more about Colombia specifically, and considering that's the topic today?
So I'm a visual learner, so what you see in the back are some of our initial results for Colombia. Because one of the first questions that we want to ask is, is this having an impact? Agroforestry-wise, what's the impact on the landscape? And what we found was that in less than a decade, biodiversity is coming back, but not just that, that tree cover is actually coming back. And these efforts have doubled tree cover on Nespresso AAA farms in about 7 years. And that tree cover on the landscape has remained the same during that entire time. And to us, that was a really strong indicator of the success of the project.
Absolutely.
And to us as well, because one of the challenges we had actually with this agroforestry program when we started back in 2013 was to convince our management to invest into trees, because trees can die. And actually, even though PUR Project had a monitoring system in place where we monitor trees after 6 months and after a year and a half to make sure that they are still there, it's part of the carbon project. Actually, what Cornell managed to showcase here in these graphs is that while in the landscape the tree cover remained flat, with the interventions, we could see we had doubled the tree cover, which is quite an amazing. It means the trees survived, and therefore we had a proof point now, fully independently reviewed by science, that the trees are surviving.
So now that we know that the trees are there, which is obviously a very good thing, what further insights can we draw from the work that you've been doing? I mean, the tree cover is there. We understand that that promotes ecosystem services and habitat, but how do we take it to the next level and understand, from a species composition perspective, from a species completeness perspective, the impact the program has been having?
Yeah, I mean, we assume that trees are life, and that trees bring back life. And what we were able to really show is that you can bring back life, biodiversity, in less than a decade. And so what we saw was that agroforestry efforts in Colombia have increased biodiversity on Nespresso farms by about 10 to 20%. And to us, that's a really significant impact, especially in some of these depauperate landscapes. And we're just really excited to be able to actually measure that and have evidence that agroforestry actually does bring back life.
Absolutely. And even for further context, when we're talking about this increase in biodiversity that we've seen, we're talking about trees that are about 10 years old, right? So the initiative starting in Colombia about 12 years ago, some of those trees, a smaller proportion, as you said, the initial 100,000 would have been 12 years old. But as the program has scaled over time, we've seen increases in volumes of investment by Nespresso as we learn and adaptively managed and grown the program. So if you consider that a tree is going to grow over a 20 to 25 year period in the Colombian context, we're only halfway through the growth cycle of those trees and the impact that those trees are going to show in terms of delta and change in that habitat. So we've already seen that 10 to 20% increase in species composition from a bird perspective in those landscapes. But you can imagine, and we're very excited to see and hope that this will continue to grow and demonstrate that impact over time. So question, do you have another thing to mention there? No? So this is a unique partnership, right? You don't always see a brand such as Nespresso engaging with an academic institution such as Cornell. Where did the inspiration for that relationship come from,
Actually, we were looking for a fully independent review of these activities, even though we had already, through PUR Project, independently, even though we partner in the design and in the funding of these trees. We wanted really to have science telling us the truth, if I can say. And science holds the key, definitely. And citizen science holds the key. And Viviane probably will talk a bit more about citizen science. But so we wanted to have a matrix to measure life on farm, because we started with the video where you heard the life on farm, and we know that life on farm means biodiversity and habitat for this biodiversity. And this matrix, we wanted it to be independent, robust, replicable and benchmarkable. And that's what Viviana explained about the completeness idea, which is really you can compare from one farm to the landscape, from one landscape to another landscape in the same country, and from a country to another country. So it's really, you can benchmark this index. And for us was really what was mattering. And we had the chance to meet Cornell in Nicaragua through a common relation, and that's how we all discovered this power of science and the power of birds. And on top of that, I must say the birds for us is an easy proxy to engage farmers as well on biodiversity, because the farmers, they love their landscape, and the birds are part of the landscape. So if they protect the birds, they will protect the landscape, they will protect the farm. Yep. So for us was really what we were looking for, and Cornell with the Lab of Ornithology is really compiling all this expertise.
And I think that can't be emphasized enough, is when we talk about these initiatives, we're sitting up on stage in New York today, but the underpinning of all of the projects that we do are the local farming communities that we work with and that Nespresso sources from and that Cornell works with for the studies. And we talk about carbon a lot. For us, carbon is a specific accounting methodology. It's a compliance topic. It's an ambition that we have to address climate change. But for a farmer who's living below the living income in some circumstances, or definitely in different circumstances than we are today, it can be intangible. You can't see it, you can't touch it.
Carbon.
It's not directly their own motivation, right? But when we do start to look at other ecosystem indicators, such as biodiversity, they can see birds, and they can recognize that birds are coming back to the landscape. They can hear birds, as you heard in the video at the beginning of the session here. At the same time, water is another topic that we're all working on that looks at watershed health, and they can understand flood and drought and the restrictions that they have in water use. And these, again, are very tangible, discernible elements of ecosystem services that they can understand, and that help to empower them to understand the impacts of the projects and the work that they're doing on their own livelihoods, on their own activities, on their own families. And so I think we can't underestimate enough. Yes, we talk about carbon a lot, but it's many of these other more visible, tangible indicators that we see in the field that the farmers actually resonate with. And we need those farmers to buy into these programs and be empowered through the impacts that they're having. For Cornell, this is a bit of a different collaboration than you would normally see from an academic partner to a private sector actor. What are some of the key success factors, but maybe were there any surprises about working between academia and the private sector on how we do these types of relationships, these collaborations?
No, for us it was very exciting, because what we want to do is scale our impact, and how we want to bring that about is using scientific rigor, scientific information. But again, that's also relatable, and that speaks to the aspect that citizen science is not me in an ivory tower telling people what to do, but it's the farmers in Colombia themselves, is other Colombian bird watchers. In Colombia, even the police has binoculars with them sometimes. Bird watching is a really big thing in Colombia. It's very important for the tourism industry. The tourism industry in Colombia is a huge, huge kind of export. And so birds really kind of tie together all of that information that is not coming from even me, that I'm not collecting or that you're collecting, but that we're harnessing that in a way that speaks for itself. And we were really happy that Nespresso was very open to just an honest and transparent evaluation, using information that we gather from the public to say what is happening on these farms, what is happening on these landscapes, and really thinking what actions need to happen on the ground to bring about nature positive change. So for us, if we only publish papers, we're only going to get so far. But if we work with game changers, such as yourselves, we will really be able to achieve a nature positive future.
Absolutely. And maybe with the last half minute that we have, one last question, Julie. What's next? Now that this seems like the seed of a tree that's going to grow in terms of information that you'll have as Nespresso and ambition that you could have towards metrics outside of carbon. What do you see as next for Nespresso?
We see potentially a biodiversity credit coming up to account for this contribution to nature positive. And we will count on you guys because definitely you hold the key.
Absolutely. And when we talk about those nature credits, one thing that you'll notice, more and more discourse on nature has arisen since the Convention on Biological Diversity last year in Montreal. And so the work that we've been doing all together, we very much have a compass pointing towards the science-based targets for natures, the TNFDs, other acronyms that you will have heard this week, and very purposefully are seeking to align on how do we use this great data to make sure that we're moving the target forward in the industry on being best practice for the reporting of metrics across the nature spectrum.
And if I may just take the last point, for me, what worked well with all of you is collective intelligence. And I also want to thank the people on the ground, because it would be impossible without having people on the ground from PUR Projet, from Cornell, from the Nespresso Agronomist Network, to really, and the farmers, of course, to really showcase for you today. So thank you to all of them.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And if you do want more information, you can use the QR code up there. Thank you both.
Thank you.